it's worth repeating. An Arab world that stretches from the Atlantic Ocean to the Persian Gulf. 350 million Arabs speaking one language, worshipping one God, with a common culture and overwhelmingly a common religion, but an absolute adherence to monotheism and the belief in that one God, has the potential to be an international superpower. Imagine all that land from Marrakesh to Bahrain, all that water, all that oil, all that gas, all those people, all speaking that one language. If they were moving in the direction of unity and independence, nobody in the world would be able to ignore the Arabs. Everybody in the world would have to take account of the wishes and the interests of the Arabs, instead of the playground for imperial looting, which the Arab world has been for a century. At least for 100 years, the imperialists have divided in order to rule the Arabs, in order to steal their things. And they have looted much, maybe most, of the bounty which God gave to the Arabs under their soil and under their waters. So that hundreds of millions of Arabs are poor, whilst a tiny number are so filthy rich, they have absolutely no idea what to do with their money. Spending it in the casinos and the bordellos and the arms bazaars and the property markets and the upmarket stores in London and Paris and New York and elsewhere, whilst Arabs go hungry and live stunted lives for lack of the opportunity which the investment of that money in their economy, in their society, could have provided them. But as long as the Arabs remain divided and weak, why should the West stop stealing their things? If you don't respect yourself in life, why should anyone else respect you? That's a key lesson. Let me take a moment to describe who Sykes and Picot were. A French and an English politician in the case of Sykes, and foreign affairs official from the Quai d'Orsay in the case of Picot, sat in the building in which I sit and have done for 26 years. Every day, for 26 years, I have had to walk past a room in which a Frenchman and an Englishman sat with their maps and their pencils and their slide rules and invented what we now know as the Arab world. They broke it into wholly artificial states. They even chose kings to put on the thrones of those states they were creating. Sykes and Picot thought their project might last 20 to 30 years, as new documents have shown. If you had told them that 100 years later, Arabs would be ready to fight each other over flags and borders and states which a Frenchman and an Englishman invented for them, they would have laughed at the very idea. They imagined that the Arabs' desire to come together as one people would in the end be unstoppable. They were only looking for a break, for a period in which they could rob you and put down as many roots as well as oil wells that they could. But that 100 years, designed by Sykes and Picot, has been a century of absolute misery for the Arabs, at least most of them, with no influence over international events, regularly invaded and occupied when indirect occupation would no longer do. The most foul and corrupt regimes propped up and supported endlessly by the governments that succeeded Sykes and Picot, and joined, of course, by the superpower, the United States of America. During that time, they have really partied on your account. Not only do they get the oil and the gas at the price and the pace they dictate, they insist that the rulers of the Arab world invest the petrodollars they pay them in Western economies and Western arms industries and the like. But that began just in the last few years to be insecure. They feared the rise of political Islam. They thought that organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood might have revolutionary potential, which might bring them to power, topple the kings and the presidents and the tyrants, and change things for the better. So they determined upon a new course, which I describe as Sykes-Picot II. Sykes-Picot II is so bad that the day might come when we look back on Sykes-Picot I with nostalgia. We might wish to be back in the day when there were 23 Arab countries instead of 123 or 523. Not countries, but emirates, divided into little statelets based on sect or confession or ethnicity, all armed and facing each other, rather than facing out at those who exploit them. Don't think it's fanciful. Some people say to me, well, how could they partition Arab countries? It would require the mass movement of people, maybe millions of people, from one zone to another zone. Don't think that that is beyond them. And study the fate of the millions who perished and whose lives were disfigured, some forever after, by the partition of the Indian subcontinent, the creation of India and Pakistan, and then later Bangladesh and Pakistan, and the mass death toll and misery that those partitions required. Actually, partitioning the Arab world on a sectarian basis would be chicken feed compared to the partition of the Indian subcontinent, almost 1 billion people. The partition would look something like this. In Lebanon and Syria, indeed Lebanon and Syria would cease to exist. And there would be a Druze emirate, Christian emirates, Sunni Muslim emirates, Shia Muslim emirates, Kurdish emirates. How many is that? That's 5 or 6 or 7 already in what is now 2 countries. Alawain, another. There are actually 23 religions in Syria alone. Think of the endless potential for sowing so much sectarian and ethnic hatred amongst the people that it no longer became tenable for them to live together in one state or even in 2 states in the case of Syria and Lebanon, which are artificial creations in any case. I met a man of 93 called Professor Dabas in Jordan. High on a mountain we sat. We looked around us at these countries that Sykes and Picot had created. I asked him, when you were young, there was nothing called Jordan. There was no country called Lebanon. What did you call yourself when you were young? He thought for a minute, and he shrugged and he said, we were Arabs from Bilad Sham. Now, that's what the Arabs in Bilad Sham should think, that they are all Arabs in the land of Sham. But do they think so now? Will they think so if the poison of Sykes-Picot 2 courses through their veins for long enough and destroys any conception of Arabness amongst them? The imperialists working on this Sykes-Picot 2 plan believe not. They believe that just as it was possible to make a Lebanese believe he was different from a Syrian, so different he was ready to die to assert that difference, can easily be persuaded that he's not a Lebanese at all. He's a Sunni and has nothing to do with a Christian or a Shiite or a Druze, even in his own country of Lebanon. They believe that this can be done, and there are some signs that they are right. That just as Stalingrad was the turning point of the Second World War, when the hordes surrounded the city in their hundreds of thousands and starved the people so that they ate every rat, every dog, every horse in the city, some reduced even to eating their own dead. Just as the Nazi hordes thought that they could choke the life out of the then Soviet Union by winning the Battle of Stalingrad, so this battle to defend Syria will prove a turning point for the Arabs. I believe that it can be so. I believe in the Arabs more than the Arabs believe in themselves. And they have to find a way to break out of this malaise of waiting for the foreigner to tell them what to do, to organize what's going to happen in their countries. And I believe that they can do it. Because there are many bad Arabs, and I've met most of them. There's one called Fuad Signora. I remember him well. For 20 years I knew him. And then in 2006, I turned up at his office 1 or 2 days after the Israeli surrender to the Hezbollah forces in 2006. I had been on many television programs. The chair referred to one of the most celebrated on Sky News, where I said that Hezbollah were giving Israel a bloody good hiding on the screen that I could see. I went into his office that baking August of 2006. Before I even sat down, this man I'd known for 20 years shouted at me from behind his desk, "Stop saying we won the war. We didn't win the war." I said, "Prime Minister, I've known many Arab leaders that lost wars and claim they won them. You're the first Arab leader to win a war and claim that you lost one." And of course, he had to claim that he lost it because he didn't want to enjoy the prestige that the Lebanese resistance then basked in, virtually universally across all of the Arab world and much of the rest of the world also, at least amongst those who love liberty. It was a baking hot day. He kept us for 1 hour without offering tea, without offering coffee, without offering a glass of water even. My colleague, Man Bashur, is quite a big man, was sweating profusely, but not a tissue or a glass of water was forthcoming. Even in the Mokhayam, in the camp, you're given a glass of water, followed by a cup of tea, then a cup of coffee. The families are scurrying around to collect the cups and saucers. They wouldn't dream of having a guest amongst them and treat them in the way that Senora treated us. He's not, of course, the worst. That day that he cried is one that we'll never forget. Or when he kissed Condoleezza, and when the Arabs around the world shouted, "Give him a visa, Condoleezza, give him a visa and take him to your heart." I've known many bad Arabs. Trust me on that. I don't want to go further down that road. It's too personal. I've known many bad Arabs, and I've known many apathetic Arabs who had lost their way, lost their religion, lost their faith, lost their confidence in themselves. But I'll tell you this, some of the best people that I have ever met are Arabs. And it's important that Arabs focus on them as their role models. The children of the Palestinian Intifada are Arabs. The young men of the Iraqi resistance to American, British invasion and occupation were Arabs. Hezbollah are Arabs. Arabs can do it if they are united, if they have leadership, if they have faith in themselves and in God. The Arab world can be transformed. It takes in the desert just a few drops of rain to transform the landscape. I believe that the events now occurring, notwithstanding hiccups and setbacks in this Arab Spring, these are drops of rain that will transform the landscape. And the most beautiful garden of them all will bloom in Damascus as the enemy is driven from the land. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.